Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. Today is stage 4 of the UAE tour, 174 kilometers, about 110 miles in length, pancake flat. We're looking at a pure sprint stage on today's stage 4. When I turn on the cameras and sit on the Chesterfield, I'm listening to the commentators. It's my man Carlton Kirby who calls the finish of most of the races better than anybody I've ever heard, and Brian Smith. They're talking about the long sprint train. And what do they mean about the long sprint train? They mean having 5, 6, 7 guys all lined up, taking their sprinter all the way into the finish, dropping them off at 150, 200 meters to go, and leaving them an easy sprint win. Now, Brian Smith is saying the long sprint train is dead nowadays, but he doesn't quite go into all the explanations of why it's dead. And of course, here on the Butterfly Effect, what I like to do is explain the tactics and what's going on. And so on a stage like today, when nothing happened for the first whole part of the race until we start getting into the last 5K, I got to find something interesting to bring you. So my take is on the long sprint train. Why is it not working? Why is it dead, like Brian Smith says in today's stage 4 UAE tour? And I agree with him. It's dead. But the reason why it's dead is not that it doesn't work. The long sprint train is magnificent. When you put it together and you have experience, power, and the sprinter that can win at the end of the day, the long sprint train is the best that you can do, and it can't get beat. They're so fast, they're so strong that that's how it worked in the old days. They had the right leadouts. But now, like I've told you guys, there's many races going on, so these big 30-man World Tour sprint teams are all separated, going to different places all over Europe and all over the world in general, because there's basically 4 races going on. So the sprint trains get watered down, the strength of the team. And then when you take a team like Quick Step here, remember, there's 7 rider teams. In the old days, there were 8. In my days, there were 10 guys on a team. So you could have GC riders that were super strong. You could have lead out guys that were super strong. And you could have the best sprinters in the world, talking like Mario Cipollini. And of course, Cavendish, we know, is the current, if not the outstanding best sprinter that the world of cycling has ever seen when you take it throughout his whole career. Remember, 34 stage victories at the Tour de France, tied with Eddie Merckx. So let's get back into the stage, and I'm going to explain it as we come into the finish. The long sprint train, why it doesn't work. The shorter sprint train, why it's most often why we see it. And of course, the individual guy who's just up there, the mercenary guy doing his own work, trying to get some results here at the UAE Tour. All right, 3 guys up the road, and they're in the form of AG2R, Alex Bodine. He's 2:14 on the general classification. Zaccarato from Green Project, 3:41 down on the general classification. And Tunelli, his teammate from Green Project. Those 3 riders only get about a 2.5 minute gap throughout the whole stage when the camera's on. And everything I've seen, what the cameras are showing me from earlier in the stage, they didn't get any more time than that because they have many teams back there chasing. I mean, every sprinter team is at the front except for Ineos. They're not at the front. Remember, they have Platt Pier racing for general classification, and they do have a pure sprinter here, but they're still not willing to ride the front, at least when the camera's on. Whether if they ran before, I have no idea. But Quick Step is the other team that's not on the front, and they have the race leader here in Remco Evenepoel. Plus, of course, they have the sprinter here, Tim Miller, winner of stage 1, and they're not going to ride the front. Now, I see all these other sprint teams riding the front in the form of Jaco Alula for Dylan Groenewegen. Bora Hansgrohe's on the front for Sam Bennett. Lotto Soudal's riding the front for Caleb Ewan. Movistar's on the front for Gaviria, and Jumbo Visma's on the front for Olaf Koy. Now, Koy crashed in yesterday's stage, but clearly Jumbo Visma believe he's still in with a shot at winning here on today's stage 4 of the UAE team, or of the UAE Tour. Sorry. Now, we get down into it, and you start looking at the time gap up to the front riders. There's still a threat up there from AG2R, right? Alex is up there at 2:14 down on the general classification. So when I'm seeing all these other teams ride, and I'm still like, Quick Step, they've got out of this without having to ride the front, even though there's a bit of a threat on the general classification where the other teams could have just backed off and said, nah, we're not going to ride the front. We're going to keep all our guys fresh. We're going to try to do the long train at the finish of today's stage. Now, we see the other teams. I don't agree necessarily. I think Quick Step should still be at the front just because of the threat up there from Alex from AG2R, but the other teams are going to ride. They want to make sure it's a 100% sprint, even though there's 3 stages adding today that's left for sprinters. Now we're going to go all the way into this exciting part of the stage because nothing happened throughout the beginning. You guys don't have to go back and watch it, but we can tune in at about 5 kilometers to go. This is when we start seeing Bahrain Victorious on the front in full numbers. They're trying to do the long train up there. They got their whole team lined out on the left side of the road. Things are starting to get interesting. The 3 breakaway companions are still up the road, but only by about 10 seconds. We know they're going to get caught, but I want you to look at the peloton picture because we know it's getting nervous back there with all of the teams lined up. Bahrain Victorious on the left side of the road, Tudor's there. UAE Team Emirates is there, Alpecine's there, and Ineos are starting to get to the front now because they want to keep Plapp out of trouble, and LA Viviani's their sprinter, so they got double reasons to come into the finish of this stage at the front. Now, with those teams fighting at the front, we're going to see the gap start to come down to the front 3 for sure, and then once we get under 3 kilometers to go at about 2.7, I want to point out in the picture, let's look back, it's Lotto Destiny back there that's all lined up on the left side of the road trying to do the long game, but they're not at the front right now. Now, if you can be at the front at 1.5 with 5 guys, that's a pretty good long game, but once you got 5 guys lined up, when we go back to what Brian Smith was trying to tell you guys earlier, if you're watching the GCN commentating where it's dead, they're all 5 back there pushed on the left side of the road. As the 3 breakaway companions are caught, they're coming back on the left next to the curb there. And that means a lot of riders got to swing all the way into the field and push around. And that's going to cause a little bit of chaos back there. And they're right around there where Jumbo-Visma are, but too far back from the front of the peloton to do the long game at this point in time. Because you got to be getting on the front just about at this moment and be going fast and keep the peloton strung out if you're trying to do the long game. Now we're going to see where once the road starts to open up at 1.9 kilometers to go, we see the gap moves over to the left. Lotto Soudal start throwing in a big time effort there. Problem is there's an island coming up in the road. I think it's Thomas de Hint. He throws out his right hand, touches the hip there of the Bahrain Victorious rider as he's telling him, hey, I'm here, man. You got to keep a little bit of space for me. The Bahrain Victorious rider doesn't move over. Problem is, though, as we come out of the island there, you see Lotto Soudal made it to the front, but only 2 or 3 of them did. When we look back in the picture, just behind the aerial view, you're going to see Caleb Ewan stuck back there behind Jumbo-Visma. Now, things are getting interesting, and once we get a little bit further, as we're coming up to the last right turn at 900 meters to go, let's back up just a little bit further, go about 1.1, 1.2, but keep in mind at 900 meters, the right-hand turn is coming up, and it's the last turn here at stage 4 with a straightaway to the finish. Now, it hasn't been windy, so there hasn't been any kind of reason for riders to be in the gutters this way or that way, or any reason to tire people up, so that's why you see this peloton fighting so hard together. Problem is, when we look at the center of the peloton here, you're going to see that Quick Step's coming to the front. They're coming to the front with Bert van Leerburg and Tim Miller. This is called the short team. This is not the long team. This is the short sprint team. They're going to try to do it with 2 guys, and Bert van Leerburg's right at the center because he knows once we start making that right turn, he needs to be at the front and keep his sprinter out of the way, stage 1 winner Tim Miller. We look over, Lotto Soudal's at the front too, but again, you look back, Caleb Ewan's lost. On the right side, Intermarché throughout the last kilometer and a half have been bumping off every team. I saw them go basically shoulder to shoulder with Bora Hansgrohe and then bumped some Astana riders along the way. So they're trying to come up the right side of the road, same thing to shoot into this right turn, and they're doing it with a slightly smaller team than long and a little bit more than just 2 because they got 3-4 guys there on the right side of the road. So we got all kinds of scenarios here. And when we look at that picture again with Quick Step, Tim Miller, right behind him is Milano, and Milano for UAE Team Emirates, he's doing the super short mercenary sprint here as he's the only guy really. He had some help keeping him to the front before this point, but now he's chose to stay on Tim Miller's wheel. Now we fly into the right bend. Lotto Soudal won the race to the right turn, but they really lost the team long game because there's nobody on his wheel, right? Bahrain Victorious sitting second. They'll come out of this 900 meters with Lotto Soudal in first, Bahrain Victorious in second, and it's Nikias Arndt that's sitting second wheel. And then I believe it's the Tudor riders that open up the gap and allow the 2 riders in front to get a gap. Now we'll see at about 700 meters, 2 riders both look over their shoulder and they realize they got a gap. Lotto Soudal's realized he didn't win the long train game here because they did everything wrong. And what I'm going to point out the biggest is right after they came through that island, it was going to open up again to the left side. And the lotto rider on the front looked back over his shoulder at the veteran, Thomas de Hint. And Thomas de Hint, he looked at him. Thomas de Hint gave him the nudge to go over to the left side as the road was going to open again. That, I think, was a crucial mistake for Lotto Soudal at that point in time in the race, because Caleb Ewan was back there on the left side behind Jumbo-Visma and wouldn't be able to squeeze through if they moved to the left side, which Thomas de Hint told his teammate, probably his younger teammate in front, to move to the left, and that's why he did it. When you move to the left, it's going to open up the center there, and then the riders that have been getting a good draft can come straight through the center, but Caleb Ewan's a little boxed in on the left side, so that's not going to help the Lotto Soudal rider. Now, let's get back up out of this final right turn, and that's why we don't see Caleb Ewan at the front. But we do see Lotto Soudal, who thought they won the long sprint team, but you did not. As he realizes he doesn't, when he looks back and sees the gap, he sits up. Now it's time for Bahrain victorious Nikias Ant to throw in that Hail Murray, because he's about 500 meters from the line, so he throws in a big jump off the Lotto Soudal's rider, and he starts swinging all the way over to the right side of the fencing. When he's about in the middle of the road, though, we take a look at the picture back. Guess what? It's Fernando Gaviria, Movistar, that's moving up along the right side of the fencing, and he's coming fast. Now we see Bert van Leerberg, that was on the front leading it out, trying to bring back those two guys. Nikias Ant moves all the way over to the right side fencing, and now it's Fernando Gaviria that's got a little gap, but he's going to get a slingshot off of the Bahrain Victorious's wheel, but he's got Tim Miller on his wheel, who has Milano back there, Sam Welsford from DSM's back there, and he's got Olaf Koy from Jumbo-Visma. Now, as Fernando Gaviria is coming up to about 200 meters to go, he's gotten the speed to slingshot off of Nikias Ant from Bahrain Victorious's wheel to the left side. He's going full gas. And we see where it's Sam Welsford from DSM that's slotting onto the wheel of Gaviria, just as Tim Miller is coming through and can't quite hold the wheel there. Now Fernando Gaviria is going to move back to the right side of the fencing. Sam Welsford's going to throw in a big acceleration at about 150 meters to go. He starts his, and at about 100 meters to go, we're going to see Fernando Gaviria look over to his right, and he knows his legs are falling off, and some speed is coming from the left side. It's in the form of Sam Welsford, and at the same time we look at Sam Welsford accelerate, Olaf Koy has started his sprint going to the left. Now we take a look back at the picture again. Tim Miller, who had Fernando Gaviria's wheel and now has lost it. We see it's Milano UAE Team Emirates that's gotten beat up on the first three stages here, the UAE Tour. Milano's threading the gap there from Sam Welsford and Tim Miller, and that's going to cause Tim Miller to have to slow down just a hair. Honestly, he didn't have the legs to win today anyways, but Milano's accelerating fast as he's coming up with 75 meters to go. He's gaining on Sam Welsford's wheel. 50 meters to go. It's a drag race. Left side, Olaf Koy, the kid who crashed yesterday for Jumbo-Visma, he's going even, and it looks like it's going to be a bike throw at the line because Olaf Koy's left. Center, Sam Welsford from DSM, who had a little bit of help from his teammates throughout the stage, but kind of almost doing it a little bit as a mercenary this last final few hundred meters. And then just to the right side of him, coming up fast, Milano from UAE Team Emirates, that's pure mercenary here, that's been following Tim Miller's wheel all the way before the final right turn, and now he's finally hitting the wind, trying to win today's stage 4 of the UAE Tour. With 25 meters to go, it's a drag race to the line, and then right at the line we see it's a bike throw for UAE Team Emirates Milano to win today's stage. Second on the stage, Olaf Koy, who crashed yesterday, throws the bike too. He gets second. Third on the stage is DSM's Sam Welsford, and fourth on the stage, Klein from Tudor. I'm going to throw out a little shout for you. You didn't make the podium, but that was a fine sprint to get a fourth place here for such a small team at the UAE Tour. Tim Miller drifted as he just didn't have the legs, even though he had great positioning doing that small sprint train into the finish of today's stage. Now, this was a great stage when we're talking about the sprinter teams because he saw Lotto Soudal, who made a lot of mistakes. And like I said, if you're going to do the long sprint train, you have to have power or some kind of crazy wind conditions to be able to do the long sprint train. Does it work? Is it dead? It is never dead. We just don't have the right composition of riders. If we take Quick Step, let's say I throw in Remco Evenepoel, who kept the race leader's jersey and nothing changed in the top 3 of the general classification. But let's say Quick Step's not interested in being safe and secure with Remco Evenepoel. Quick Step could do the long train and probably get away with it because they have Remco Evenepoel here. So you put Remco Evenepoel on the front from 3K out, he could easily do those 2K with the kind of form he has. Nobody will argue with me on that, right? Because we've seen him do 4K before many, many times. But when you're talking Quick Step and you take Remco Evenepoel out of the picture, all of a sudden you no longer have the long sprint train capability because you've lost too much power. But let's say there wasn't 4 races going on. Let's say they didn't race in Spain, Portugal, and they didn't race in Nice in the south of France right before the UAE Tour started. Let's say you came here with a solid team. Now all of a sudden you could do the sprint train, especially if you could throw in just a little bit of wind or some kind of crazy narrow technical roads. Now all of a sudden the long sprint train can come back, but you got to have power. You got to have someone like a Wout van Aert that's up there pulling, or let's say a Christophe Laporte, or let's say we talk about it's a GC guy like Remco Evenepoel or Tadej Pogačar. You throw that hit on the team. You throw Primož Roglič on your team, someone with big-time force. The long sprint train is not dead. It's just not the right composition here at the UAE Tour to have it with no wind and with guys racing for the general classification who are super strong like Remco Evenepoel. I love today's take at the finish. It was total chaos everywhere. I love watching how teams tried to put it together with the big sprint team, the small sprint team, and then the individual mercenary like Sebastian Milano, who won today's Stage 4 and salvaged UAE Team Emirates' hope at their home big stage race here in the UAE. They did a fantastic job. Congratulations. That was a big, big surprise, but it was a great last 5K finish here on Stage 5 of the UAE Tour. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.